First of all, Jenkins allows you to integrate with a repository and pull the code from there, and then it allows you to build and change configurations of if required in that code. Okay, so what is it? Say the code is a Java code. We have the code and commit. This is the pipeline which we are going to implement. So first of all, the code and commit phase is actually pulling the code from the repo. It could be Git, GitHub, Stash, or anything. So we'll try whatever repos we have used till now. So we have a GitHub repo. So we'll pull the code from there. We will use a SVN repo. We'll also use Stash. Stash is the Bitbucket which I was showing, the paid one. So these three we can try. Other repos, there are various companies which have their own repository softwares. So those are similar. So you won't need to worry about them. So if you try just pulling code from any of the repositories, that would do, and learn the concepts of how exactly works. And what I was talking about, the next phase is when the code is pulled, then Jenkins has capabilities and plugins to build the code. Like say it is a Java program. So Java, you have kept the code in the Git repository. So Jenkins pulls it, and it can build the, compile the Java program and form a jar file. Normally what happens in Java programs, people write code like something .java, okay, and then they run a set of commands to compile it to prepare a jar file. Now that jar file, again, if you run certain commands, that jar file is can be hosted on a Tomcat server to see a website or run a web program. Okay, it works that way. So Jenkins can do all that. It can use certain plugins like Maven. One plugin is Maven to build a Java program. So that is used by Jenkins to get the jar file built. Okay, Jenkins can also deploy your code into Docker containers. Docker containers are just like virtual machines, but a bit different. We'll get to know when we do that. And it can also build images for Docker containers. Okay, and all that can be done through the Jenkins. And then we can write and put test cases which will test the server and let you know whether that website is running or not. And then you can ask Jenkins to release the code to a certain branch if required. First of all, we'll have an overview of the Jenkins. Okay, so for that, what I have done is I have started one of the servers where we installed Jenkins. The server 2 is having Jenkins for me. So you can also have your Jenkins server started, and if it is not installed, you can reinstall it. And then once that is done and you have the credentials ready, you can start the Jenkins server. So let me check the IP address of this server. Okay, it's 103, and Jenkins listens on 8080 port. We have done that too. Okay, so after that, for the first login, after installation, you might have seen there is admin and passwords stored in a certain file. So after logging in for the first time, I have changed the password to a simple password. So I have logged in into the server. So you can change the password also. I'll show you where to do that. So here you have a configure button. There you can change the password. So that will come to it. So before that, let's see each and everything component in the Jenkins that is available now before creating jobs, and I'll tell you what a job exactly is and why we are doing this. Okay, first of all, you get to this dashboard when you log in as admin for Jenkins. Okay, new item is actually a button which allows you to create a new job. Okay, so we will come to this in the end of everything. Okay, this is the actual thing which is the start of creating a pipeline. Okay, so we'll come here later on. people. If I click on this, here you can have a list of the users that are present in this system. So this is where you can also change the password for this user by going there, clicking on the user and then clicking on configure, and then here you can write the name, the email address. If you add SSH key, you can, not needed to add it here, and you can change the password here, save and apply. So that is it. Next, so that is about people, and then build history actually shows the things, the pipeline jobs which you have run. So now this would not show anything until we create a new item and run a build. Okay. Now build history doesn't make sense unless we have created any builds. Project relationship not valid now. If we have multiple projects and say some code needs to be pulled from some other project, so that thing is managed here. Also not relevant until we create a new item. Okay. So what, and check file fingerprint is also actually it checks the authenticity or the version of a certain jar file which is created. So all these parts will cover after creating the new item. So what is important here is manage Jenkins. So this will let you know about what Jenkins settings are available and different other concepts. Okay. So just click on manage Jenkins. Here you can use this to install more plugins to Jenkins, like install Jenkins, and after installation there was a post installation screen where it was asking us to install and select plugins and install them. So if someone has forgotten or just done the default settings and doesn't have a certain plugin installed, so he can go to the plugin manager from here and install the plugins. It will take you to the same screen where we actually installed. So here some updates are there since we installed. The second tab has the available plugins for Jenkins. So if something is not installed, we can install it. What are plugins? Let me repeat again. For Jenkins, to be able to interact with certain other software, it needs some plugins. Jenkins cannot talk to any other third-party application until it has a medium to do so. So plugins are those mediums which allow Jenkins to interact with certain other application. Okay. So say we want to talk to Git, it should have a Jenkins itself should have a Git client. So that is the Git plugin. So that's why you remember that we installed the Git plugin, we ticked on it. Okay. So these are the plugins which are available, not yet installed. So if you go to the install tab, you can see which we have already ticked. We have ticked and your Git would be available here. See, Git plugin is ticked already. So all these plugins are available to talk to certain client. Okay. If it is not available, then Jenkins would not be able to talk to the repository or integrate with the repository. So basically the important plugins are most of them are default, so you don't have to worry about them. All these are default, but some you have to add depending upon the job you are doing. Say I was giving an example of compiling a Java package. So I said Java requires a plugin called Maven to build the Java and convert it into a jar file. So in that case we will have to install the Maven plugin. Okay. Similarly, there are certain other plugins. Say SVN we are using as a repository server. Then you have to take the SVN plugin, and you can even find using this filter. If there is any plugin installed, then it will show. Maybe the name is different. It's Subversion. You'll see we have installed the Subversion plugin, so it will work with SVN also. So those who today, since we are trying the Git and SVN, those who haven't have this plugin activated, then you do that. You just click here and install. Okay, mine is already installed, so it's showing uninstalled. So once you do that, the Jenkins would be ready to talk to these kind of repositories, SVN and Git. And these are proxy configuration settings, not required for our case. Sometimes certain companies do not have external internet access. Now Jenkins might need internet access to pull repositories from outside. Like say I want to pull a repository from GitHub. Okay. So how do I pull a repository from GitHub? I have to connect to internet because GitHub repo is in URL github.com. Okay. So I need internet in order to access that repo. So if Jenkins is kept in an internal LAN in certain company which does not have access to internet, it cannot pull the repository from Git. So certain companies, what they do for security, they don't give default gateways in normal systems. They allow you to connect to internet through proxy servers. Okay. In browser, they set certain proxies through which the internet is. So in those cases, Jenkins needs the proxy configuration to be set so that it can connect to the internet. Okay. So that is the actual reason for this page. So there you have to set the proxy server name, the port, username and password to connect to that firewall which provides the internet, and from there the request can be forwarded. So that is not required for your case. You can directly have it blank, just like I am having. But in some confined environments where proxies, where you don't get internet, this system admin would tell you to set up a proxy. Then you just remember that Jenkins also can connect to internet through a proxy server. Okay. And these are various other plugins which you can manually upload, not needed really. Okay. So let's get back to the Manage Jenkins page. So this is about plugins and installation. Just go through this entire tool, not very difficult, and most of the options would not be needed day-to-day basis. Only having the pipeline built, all these options will be needed. I'll show you that. So once you are very comfortable with this tool, half of your job is done. Mostly DevOps is revolving around Jenkins and having various tools to implement to the Jenkins pipeline. So be very comfortable with this entire Jenkins dashboard. Okay. Next is configure system. Here, if you go to this link, it will allow you to do a certain configuration changes. So it's taking some time. Okay, so now you can see one form has opened up. This is actually giving you the information of where Jenkins is actually working from. Okay, in the server. We didn't know where Jenkins is actually installed. We knew that Apache's config file is in /etc httpd.conf and Apache's index.html and all those program files are present in ware www.html. So we knew that these are the two places where Apache operates from, and there is one service which we use to start Apache systemctl start httpd. So we know the entire story about Apache. But Jenkins, what we did, we just did some packages installation, and then we did yum install Jenkins and started the service. We don't know how Jenkins is exactly working and where the code files are stored. So this page gives you those settings exactly operating, and it also allows you to modify them. But not required. All the settings which are default are good enough. You won't need to modify them. But sometimes in some special cases you might have to do them. Like Jenkins home directory is where, say some server you are working on, this /var is already full, and it is critical to move your entire Jenkins setup to some other directory. Then you have to change this setting. So in those cases you need this page, not for regular. Okay. Next, this is one important setting. System message not required. This is one important setting, very important. Number of executors, this one. Okay, number of executors. What this does is, what is the executor? Let me tell you. Executor is actually a build agent, agent of Jenkins. What is an agent? Like Jenkins is a program, the master program, which will manage your build pipelines. Okay. Now Jenkins does not say you have 5 programmers who have given 5 build jobs. Okay. Build jobs means this pipeline which we were talking about. Code commit, build, config, scan, test, release and deploy. This entire pipeline has to be executed in order to have an entire product delivered. Okay, CI CD pipeline which we discussed, continuous delivery. So say there are 5 programmers who committed code and everything is automated. So the code needs to be pulled, then it goes to build, then goes to test, then release and deploy. Okay, so this thing is occurring. So now Jenkins take the request and starts working. Okay, at the same time, say another developer, another 3 or 4 developers also started building their own things. Now can Jenkins handle all those 5 things at the same time? Because it is working on one thing at a time, right? It is one program, the Jenkins demo. It will take the request. So what will happen to the others who are executing that? Okay, so in order to handle it in a very good way, Jenkins has a built queuing system. Okay, queuing system means if a request comes, it will put it in a queue. It will not, it will execute one thing at a time and rest would be waiting. Like I'll show you when we start building, you will see it goes to a waiting state unless Jenkins starts to execute that build. Okay, and then once the pipeline is free, then it allows the next build and keeps the others waiting. But sometimes some companies might want to have multi-threaded Jenkins build systems, like they want 2 builds or 3 builds to be occurring at a time. So in order to enable that, Jenkins has an option of having multiple build agents. Those are called these build executors. Okay, so from here you can determine how many build agents to keep in a Jenkins server. So now I have kept it at 2. So 2 build executor. In the left hand screen you can see build executor status, 1 idle, 2 idle. These are the 2 number of executors which are running for me now. So what does that mean? I can run 2 builds at the same time in this server. If I make it 4, then what happens? I can run 4 builds at the same time in this same server. Okay, so that is how we define this build execution. So if I make 4, then what happens? If 4 people are running this build, then no one goes to a queue. Okay, all can get their jobs done parallelly. So it's parallel execution. Okay, but say I have 6 users who are building parallelly, but I have 4 build executors or build agents. So then what happens? 4 will be getting the builds and 2 will stay in queue until 2 of the pipelines are free. Okay, so that is how this setting is helping us to do multiple builds. Now you might think, why not make this 100 or 200? So I will have 200 executors, I'll have 200 executors, so I never wait in a queue. That would make your system to crash. Why? Because each one you have to think on a system level. Like when we are executing a certain pipeline, it is using resources, memory and CPU. So if you have a multi-core CPU which has more than why I have set it to 2, because I have a CPU 2 core present in my virtual box. Okay, so that's why even if one CPU is allocated to one build agent, then it will work properly. Now if I make 200 build agents and I have just 2 core CPU, so it will be waiting for CPU time, so it will go slow and the entire system might freeze. Okay, it will hang or crash. So that's why, depending upon the number of threads in your CPU, you number of cores in your CPU, you can set the number of threads for your executor. If a company has in a production system has a very big server, 24 core CPU and say 250 GB RAM, all those big servers, and Jenkins is working there, then you can have 50 build executors or 100 build executors. Okay. And this also safeguards your system, means this Jenkins server will never crash. Say I make this 2, and even if 20 developers put their requests, the system will not crash because it will only take 2 requests at a time, because there are 2 build executors which are idle. Rest would be in queue. Whenever these 2, the first 2 which are building, they will finish, then number 3 and number 4 will start working. Okay, so this is how this thing works actually, the entire Jenkins build executor thing. And having build agents is very crucial setting. Okay, if you just make one build agent also, it's not good because most of the things will go into a queue. So at least 2 is good, but you should ensure that you have sufficient processors. Okay, here for build agent, mostly processing time is more important than memory. Memory is of course required, but if you have that 2 GB RAM in this VM, it will work. And if you choose 2 core, it is better. Okay, but don't think that if you have 1 core CPU, it will not work. For us, the kind of things we are doing in this lab, this will work perfectly fine. But this is for resource intensive jobs, because in real world scenario they would be building lots of jar files and all. So in those cases more resources would be needed. So that's why I gave you the funda of what exactly is happening, number of executors and how to set that. Okay, so these are the now you can see on the left hand side 2 of the build executors or build agents are present in the left hand corner. So number 1 is idle, number 2 is idle. Why both are idle? Because we are not running any jobs. When I run a job, you can see the status. It will show that 1 is busy, 2 is busy, or things like that. Okay, this Jenkins node, so that whenever you run any build, it will show that this build was running in Jenkins node number 1. Say a company has multiple Jenkins servers, then they use labels to identify the Jenkins servers. So all these are optional settings, but this executor setting is very important, and this location is very important. I'll tell you more about this location. Let me show you. This home directory where live Jenkins, let's go to that place in the server. We have installed Jenkins in the server 2, this server. So if I go to the location, I go to that location, cd var lib Jenkins. If I do a listing, here you can see all these files are present here, config.xml credentials. You need not worry about these files. These are the system files generated by Jenkins. So Jenkins itself uses these files to run its jobs, to show the front end, which we are seeing here. So everything is done using this Jenkins. These files are actually the settings and configurations which are running Jenkins from the backend. So this is the backend for Jenkins. What is of interest to us is this workspace. Okay, if I go to workspace, and do a listing, I can see certain there's folders here. These are actually the project folders which we will be creating. Okay, some time ago I might have created these projects in this server, so these are those folders for that project. Okay, so actually when we run a job in Jenkins front end, it needs in the what I said, Jenkins, what Jenkins does, it makes your job simpler because you are doing everything through a GUI front end. You don't have to run the commands git commit and git pull, all those things you're not doing. Jenkins is doing for you, it is automating. But in the back end it needs a shell to run everything, right? So that is the workspace. In workspace it creates a folder, and inside that folder it does the job for a particular project. So why I showed you that path, because sometimes even Jenkins may stop or it may have some failure, and you say you need that project file. So you have you can manually go, you know basic Linux commands, you can manually go to that folder and retrieve your project and say run it in some other Jenkins server which is working fine. Okay, so that's why you should know where the workspace exactly is. So it is in varlib Jenkins / workspace. So whatever we do in Jenkins actually will go to that location in the server backend. Okay. Now here there are some other settings. So these are optional, as I said. Use this node as much as possible. This is actually a setting for multiple nodes. If you have multiple Jenkins nodes with labels, you can say that only build jobs with these labels will run on this node. So we'll come to that later, like how you can handle multiple Jenkins servers and all. But having a single one run will give you idea of the entire thing. And that is fine. Quiet period. This is what, after running every job, Jenkins has a cooling off time of 5 seconds or whatever you want to set. Why? This is just to bring the resources. Say I'm running a build which used a lot of CPU and RAM. It has taken the entire system, made it slow. Okay. Now after some time that build is finished finally. Now it will take some time for the system to recover and get back the resources. Like say you are doing a memory intensive job and your server is having 2 GB RAM. So entire 2 GB, near to 2 GB RAM is being used in that job. Now say that job is finished. After that the system immediately doesn't come to zero from 2 GB. Okay. It will take some time to free off the RAM and free off the CPU until the next project is allowed to run. So this gives you that cooling off time. So 5 seconds is fine. But if you don't have this cooling off time, you want to do things fast and make it zero, then what happens? One project is run successfully, the second project, and before the system gets an opportunity to cool down, next project is started building. So what will happen? The system might freeze or hang, okay, because it doesn't get time to come back to normal. Okay, so that is the, so these settings you can keep it at default. Okay. This is important, SCM, checkout retry count. Okay, what is that? This is the, like we are using the version control systems, so we are checking out code from there, the configuration management. So all these codes check out, suppose it fails for one time, suppose your internet was having a problem, backend Jenkins has uh, run a SVN checkout or a Git checkout, and for the first time it failed, then should it retry or not? That is the setting. You can make it one, at least for one retry if it fails, or if you don't want to do that, you can make it 0. So default is 0, it doesn't retry. You can make it 1, no problem. Okay. So it just is a retry. If one time it fails, it will try a build another time. If then again it fails, then it will abandon it. Okay. So I am keeping it at 0. Why? Because since we are learning here, this is not a production environment. We want to see if there is a failure. Immediately we want to see instead of waiting for another run. Okay. So let's have it 0. You can, in a production environment, make it at least 1, because in production if it fails one time, maybe it will pass the next time, so it should run again once, because there could be network failures, so we can always wait for one other time for it to work. Environment, then restrict project naming. This is a setting where, say, let me give you an example. Say someone is naming a project using a certain pattern which the company is not allowed to use. Okay, say I am creating a project whose name is project name is Microsoft something, but say Microsoft is a name which is a trademark for certain other company. So I'm not allowed to use a project or a job having that name or pattern. So I can restrict that from here. As a DevOps admin, you can restrict. You can say that if a pattern has anything which starts with Microsoft dot star, means anything starting with Microsoft, and dot star means it's a wildcard character. So anything which starts with Microsoft and then anything else after that, then that name pattern would not be allowed. Okay. Or say you don't want to have any projects which start with the word production, a prod, or anything like that. You can set that setting. Okay. So what will happen? It will know when someone creates a new project, as I said, new item will create a new project. He will not be allowed to create a project with that kind of name pattern. So if there is certain restrictions by the company that such and such names would not be allowed, then only you should use that. Otherwise not required. So you can keep it at default and you don't need to restrict. Anyone can name the project in a way he or she likes. Okay.
I'm sure you enjoyed learning from this video. Please like the video, and if you have any doubts regarding this video, please comment us in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more such informative videos. Do look out for other related videos in our playlist. For more information, visit our website now. Keep learning with Intellipaat.